Happy Chanukah, boys and girls, moms and dads, grandmothers and grandfathers. It is so sweet to be with you again tonight to share another story for Chanukah, which comes to you as a gift from all of us here at the RJC, and special thanks to my friend Mr. Winter, who has helped me bring you these stories. Tonight's story is based on a passage in the Midrash Tanchuma. It is about a princess, Princess Ketzia, who was the beautiful daughter of King Solomon. King loved this girl. She was beautiful, she was brilliantly intelligent, and she was so very good of heart. And he promised himself that this daughter could only marry a prince or a king. Well, one day, King Solomon was out with his army, and it was a very hot day. Well, you know that King Solomon knew how to speak to the animals, so he called on his friends the birds, and thousands of little birds came and fluttered over the army, providing them shade from the sun. And for the king himself, well, for the king himself, a giant eagle came and spread his wings, providing the king with shade. And while the eagle was shading his majesty, they had a little conversation. And the eagle reported, "You know, your majesty, when I was soaring very high, I overheard them talking in Shamayim, in heaven, and they said the king has a beautiful daughter whose name is Ketzia, and she is destined within the year to marry a poor boy." Well, the king was so upset. The thought that his beautiful, beloved princess would marry a poor boy, he decided that if he could just get her through this year, he could save the situation. So what did he do? The king ordered that a giant tower be created on a far-away island, the farthest island in his whole kingdom, and that in this tower there be placed enough food for a whole year, as well as sleeping places for 70 servants, all young women. And he planned to keep his daughter in that tower for the whole year, safe from marrying anyone, to make sure that what the eagle had heard in heaven could never come true. Well, he went to Ketzia and said, "My dear, I have to ask you a favor. I'm going to send you on a long voyage, and at the end of the voyage, you're going to go and live in a tall tower, and inside everything will be so comfortable, will be so luxurious, that a year will pass before you even know it. And you can watch the sea through the window and the balcony all the way at the top. And at the end of the year, I will come in a ship and bring you home." Well, Ketzia loved her father very much, and she said, "Father dear, I know that you are the wisest man in the world, and you always know what's good for me. So I will go." Well, of course, when you're King Solomon, the tower went up in no time at all, and the beautiful furniture and food was placed inside, as well as the 70 serving girls. And finally, the last to enter was the beautiful Princess Ketzia, who came on a ship and had to be raised on ropes to the window all the way at the top of the tower. And there she lived for some time, obeying the wishes of her father. Well, at the same time, there was a young man whose name was Reuven, who lived in the city of Akko in Eretz Yisrael. And Reuven was a very smart young man and a great Torah scholar, but he was very, very poor. One day, he was wandering in the fields, looking for a job, looking for some work so he could earn some money to support himself, And suddenly the wind grew cold, and it began to rain. And there he was, poor Reuben. He was wet, and he was cold, and he was so tired he couldn't even find his way home. Everything turned into mud. It was disgusting. And he saw in a field the carcass of an ox. The ox had been killed by a lion, and the lion had eaten as much as he wanted and wandered away. And poor Reuven was so tired and so hungry and so cold that he curled himself up inside the carcass of the ox, which was still warm, and there he found shelter from the rain, and he was so very tired he fell fast asleep. Well, don't you know, someone else noticed the carcass of the ox. It was a giant eagle, and the giant eagle swooped down and lifted the carcass of the ox, not even noticing the sleeping young man inside. And the eagle, as eagles do, looked for a nice, high, safe place where she could have dinner, eating what was left of the carcass of the ox. Well, the eagle flew and finally found a very high place indeed. It was a tower. Yes, you guessed it. The very tower where the Princess Ketsia was living. And the eagle deposited the ox carcass that night on the porch and ate as much as an eagle can eat and still be able to fly, and took off. Well, you can imagine how surprised the princess was when the next morning she went out on her balcony to daven Shachris, as she did every morning with the rising sun. I hope you all davened this morning. And she found the carcass of an ox. Well, if that wasn't strange enough, inside was a young man fast asleep. Well, he was sleeping so peacefully, she didn't have the heart to wake him. She just sat beside him and waited. Well, when he got up, I guess you could imagine what he looked like. He'd been all wet and messed up, and then he spent the night sleeping in the carcass of an ox. He did not look great, and he probably smelled even worse. Well, she invited him into her rooms, and she said, "You need a bath." And she walked out of the room and left him to take a nice, long, hot bath, and she had laid out beautiful linen clothes for him to put on. And when he got out of the bath, he was very handsome. Well, they sat down to have breakfast together, and they began to talk. And it would seem they fell in love. And they decided that they wanted to be together forever and ever. And Reuven, being a scholar, wrote a marriage contract, a ketubah. And the witnesses, who were the witnesses? Well, two angels, the angel Michael and the angel Gabriel, came to be the witnesses on the ketubah. And who performed the wedding? Well, Hashem himself came and was the rabbi for their wedding. And they were married right there and then in the top of the tower. And almost a year later, they had a beautiful little son, and they named him Shlomo, after the princess's father. Well, when the year of Ketsia's residency in the tower had ended, Shlomo HaMelech appeared in a giant ship, and you can just imagine his surprise when he arrived and found that his beautiful daughter had a husband, and not only a husband, but a beautiful little baby boy who had his name. Well, the king was a little surprised at first, but when he met his new son-in-law, Reuven, and saw how wise and good he was, and saw how happy his princess had become. Well, he said, I guess you can't fight with heaven. And he took the two of them home to Yerushalayim. And there he made a beautiful celebration. The biggest wedding celebration that anyone had ever seen. And his beautiful princess and her wise husband and the little boy and King Solomon lived happily ever after. Have a wonderful Chanukah, my dears. May the light of Chanukah glow in your hearts until you're 120. With much love, Chag Sameach.